Boy, if I had a dime for every time I heard this statement. I have people come to me saying, I want to set up an LLC. And the first thing I have to tell them, unfortunately, is Alberta doesn't have an LLC. And this isn't just a small technicality. It's a sign of just how much business content, podcasts, books, and YouTube channels are built entirely around American structures and American tax rules, but dropped in front of a Canadian audience without translation. Welcome to Episode 5 of From Idea to Incorporated, where we're going to discuss borrowed language, US and Canadian business structures. I see this often enough that I know this is going to be an interesting one for you. Quick and important caveat before we go. I always tell you that these videos are for educational purposes only and not specific legal or tax advice. But even more specifically here, I don't practice US law. So I've done my own research here, but as I try to bridge the gap for you between the Canadian and US things, it may be that I don't understand something completely on the American side, but we're going to give you a good general idea and get you set up. I want to help translate the term so you're not applying an American framework to a Canadian decision. Now let's start with that all-important LLC question. That stands for Limited Liability Company, and it's apparently one of the most popular structures in the United States, endorsed by people like Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad fame. And it's a kind of hybrid that gives owners limited liability protection while generally being taxed like a sole proprietorship or partnership in Canada. Profits flow through to the owner's personal return. We call this a flow-through mechanism. Now, Alberta doesn't have a direct equivalent to this. Our options are the ones we've already covered: sole proprietorship, partnership, or corporation. The closest thing to an LLC is liability protection in Canada might be something that we know as a limited partnership with a general partnership structure. With a general partner taking the liability for the limited partners, but it is nothing like the LLC and doesn't do anything like what is promised here. In Canada, Canadian corporations are taxed as their own separate entities. They're not flow-throughs. And it's a meaningfully different tax position than the US LLC. So if you've been reading these American small business contents and planning around getting an LLC, the translation you probably want is actually to go to a corporation and then speak with your accountant about the best way to structure paying yourself. I'm going to talk about this in the next section, so just hold on for a minute and you'll see how this works. It kind of fits with the idea of the next American structure we hear about, the S-corp. The S-corporation is, as I understand it, a U.S. tax election, not a separate type of company, but a tax status a corporation can elect. It also allows profits to flow through to the owner's personal returns, avoiding that layer of corporate taxes that the standard U.S. C corporation pays. Now, Canada doesn't have an S-corp election. Instead, our system actually uses something fairly automatic. It's called dividend tax integration. A Canadian corporation pays corporate tax on its profits, and when it pays those profits out to you as a dividend, the personal tax you pay on that dividend is actually just adjusted specifically to account for the corporate tax already paid. So the same dollar generally isn't taxed twice at full rate on both levels. It's a fully different mechanism, but it has a similar goal. It avoids meaningful double taxation. Now, the specific numbers, small business deduction limits, dividend tax credits, all these things should be confirmed with your accountant. I lean on my accountant heavily to answer these questions for myself, and you should too. Now, not everything needs translating. A sole proprietorship, for example, means largely the same thing in both countries. You and the business are legally one. A general partnership is conceptually similar too, although the governing legislation differs. The Partnership Act here in Alberta and state-level partnership laws in the US have a little bit different variety in them. Where the real gap opens up is specifically around those things we've talked about, the LLC and the S-corp election, because we have no Canadian counterparts to these. Now, this isn't just trivia. I've had so many clients arrive ready to set up a structure they read about in the US business book, convinced it was the move, when what they actually needed was something much more straightforward. In Alberta, corporation with a properly drafted shareholders agreement. Following American advice and turning it into a Canadian legal decision doesn't just waste time. It can mean building from the wrong structure at the outset. In episode 6, we'll get practical again when it's actually time to incorporate versus staying a sole proprietorship a little longer. That might apply to you. But if you're already in the place where you're looking at putting your structure together, or you're that guy that's like, I want to set up an LLC, hey, reach out to me. talk to me about this, because we have a way to do this that's probably going to get you to the exact same end goal, and I'd love to chat with you about it. Thank you, and we'll see you in episode 6.